Where can you find 6,000 local businesses with just one click? EverythingMidmo.com.
Hello and welcome to the Columbia Daily Tribune's Behind the Stripes webcast. This is sports editor Joe Walljasper alongside Tribune football beat writer Dave Matter. Dave, Missouri coming off a 40-32 loss to Baylor, which none of us saw coming.
Not at all.
Rank this one in the realm of the worst losses of the Gary Pinkel era.
You know, I think it's right up there, or right down there, however you want to put it. But I don't know if it's the absolute worst. I think at the time, maybe that 06 loss at Iowa State.
If it was, in fact, a loss.
If it was considered a loss, some consider it a win, or did at the time at least. For some reason, that one sticks with me just because the way that season was going. Missouri just lost 2 in a row to pretty good Nebraska and Oklahoma teams, and then controlled that game throughout up in Ames. Dan McCarney's last stand, they were 0-7 in the Big 12. Iowa State was going into that game, and then a crazy penalty on the last play from scrimmage pretty much determines that, or the second last play determines that one. So that one always sticks with me as maybe the worst loss, just because of everything that developed after that game with the controversy and all that. But this one, is as far as just a matchup of two teams, this was a pretty big upset as in terms of the last 9 years.
I think if I were to pick the worst, if you're going to go for the whole total awful weekend package, I would go back to 2004. On a Thursday night, or I believe a Thursday night or a Friday, there's 2020 special on how the girl who the arena is named after cheated her way through school, right, causing the arena the name to be changed. Then the next night you have Missouri losing a basketball game to Davidson at home. Then the next day, Missouri loses to Kansas, 31-14, I believe. Kansas, the last place team in the Big 12, led by a fourth-string quarterback, Brian Luke, puts it on Missouri. So awful. That, to me, sort of stands out as maybe perhaps at least the worst weekend in Missouri sports history. Yeah. But this was dismal in its own way.
No, it is very dismal in a lot of ways.
True. We'll get into a little of those ways. Let's talk about why we think Missouri can play okay in the first half, and then it just all goes to pot in the second half.
It's a good question. Missouri can't figure this one out. I don't know why we're supposed to be able to. So. But I think there's a lot of different factors in there, and I think a lot of it is just the fact that this is such a young team, and I don't think they know how to handle any sort of success or even really any sort of failures. It just seems like even when they play well in that first half, something happens when they walk off the field and go into that room, in that locker room. I don't know if it's just a sense of satisfaction or what, but they come out, and it's a completely different team. I looked up the numbers. They've had 37 possessions in the second half of their Big 12 games, 18 punts, 7 turnovers, 4 turnovers on downs. They've kicked 3 field goals, and they missed a field goal. It's been dismal. They've 23 of those 37 drives, they've failed to get even 10 yards. So it just nothing is working. And you can blame play calling, but I think that's kind of a knee-jerk, kind of a lame response, because the plays work in the first half a lot of the times. I don't think they all of a sudden just forget and don't realize and don't know how to call plays. You can blame the players for just executing, and they can't throw the ball, can't block, can't catch as well. I don't know if that's all it, because they do it in the first half. I don't know what the difference would be. Some of it I just think is this team's kind of immature. And they've done it on defense, too. Defense plays well in the first half in some of these games. They come out and give up a drive. They let up occasionally on that very first drive, too. So something about it. It's not a very mature team. And, they've got a couple good leaders. Sean Weatherspoon, I think, is as good as leader as Missouri's had under Gary Pinkel, but he can't do it all. And he might know the right way, but there's some kind of disconnect between the leaders of this team, the coaches, and some of these younger players, I think.
Sean Weatherspoon was kind of complaining yesterday that guys were not taking the loss very hard. Friday night, we're kind of just goofing around, and then after the loss also, I think, weren't taking it too seriously. It seemed like there may be, you don't want to say the team is divided, but I think there may be, you've got younger guys who either aren't playing that much or don't quite get it, and then you've got last go-around for a few of these seniors who probably, it's killing them to lose games this way.
And I don't know if that makes those younger kids, that they're bad kids and they're cancer or anything like that. Like we saw maybe that 04 season where there was some disruptive kids on that team.
Some of the older ones who were disruptive.
Right. I think this group, they just don't know how to respond to things. They haven't experienced a lot of this stuff, so it's all new to them, and some kids are just immature and can't handle it very well. So I think this is on the coaches and the few senior leaders to get this thing in order before it's too late, and it's almost too late.
One of the strangest things was Baylor coming in this game, their quarterback who started the year as their third-string quarterback, Nick Florence, he passes for a Baylor record, 427 yards. Now, coming in the game, he was ranked 11th in the Big 12 in pass efficiency. Meanwhile, Missouri comes in really riding high defensively, shut down Colorado almost completely. What happened there? Again, I'm asking you to answer the question that the defensive coaches can't answer themselves. But I mean, what did you see as a reason for that?
What's even more mystifying is the Missouri defensive players said that Baylor did exactly what they expected them to do. They threw a lot of their passes out in the flat, just these horizontal passes.
Which is what they did last year.
Where they did last year. They basically just throw it out to a guy in the flat and expect him to find a block and get behind it and make a play and break a tackle. And that's really what they did. Occasionally then they'd throw it deep, and they just threw it kind of up for grabs, and they had good luck with those. Missouri, even when they were in the area to get a penalty called on them, the guy still came down with the ball. So I think some of that goes back to what you talked about earlier with Weatherspoon being upset with some of the younger players, presumably on defense, the focus just didn't seem to be there. Now, Baylor did some good things. They took away Missouri's pass rush with those quick passes, but it's just inexplicable how a defense that looked so good at Colorado a week ago. Different styles, but still, the personnel, you would think Missouri would be much better on that side of the ball, and the results were just completely night and day.
I think Missouri's got some pretty good personnel defensively up front, their front seven. I'm not real sold on their secondary, especially when the ball's in the air. It seems like they have trouble making a play on the ball. And a team, I guess, maybe that can neutralize their pass rush, however that is, in this case with the quick passing game, I think it can have some luck. Whereas Colorado, everything was kind of a slow developing, everything was kind of in tight quarters, and so they got to play more of a traditional defense against a traditional offense, whereas they were spread out. And if they can't get to the quarterback, that's kind of their whole MO. And then I think those guys in the secondary got exposed a bit. They go to Kansas State this week. Kansas State, obviously the surprise team of the whole Big 12. 4-2 in the league. They just get done beating Kansas. This is a team that barely beat Massachusetts at the beginning of the year. They lose to Louisiana Lafayette. Is this team for real? I mean, do you have a sense?
Well, they're good enough to win a bad North Division. They still have to get by Nebraska, which plays Kansas State in Lincoln. So, I'm kind of leaning towards Nebraska winning this thing. But Kansas State will give it a good shot, and I think they've got a great chance to beat Missouri because, one reason more than anything is Bill Snyder's on the sideline, and he's never lost to a Gary Pinkel coach team. This team kind of has a lot of the trademarks of a Bill Snyder team. It's not the flashiest group. But they don't make mistakes. They run the ball pretty effectively. They're leading the Big 12 in turnover margin, leading it in time of possession. They just kind of sit around and wait for you to make a mistake. And this Missouri team, I think they're fully capable of doing that against Kansas State. So it'll be interesting. The way Missouri's playing right now, there's no reason to think they'll go into Manhattan and win. But if you look at both teams and the talent on both sides of the ball for both teams, you think Missouri's got a good chance at beating anybody left on their schedule. But for some reason, they're just not putting it all together for 4 quarters.
They've got a running game that even though people know it's coming because they don't throw the ball much, nobody's really been able to stop very well, even Oklahoma. And also they got a kick returner, which Missouri has really had an atrocious kickoff game, and that could be a big, if Missouri ever kicks off, which maybe they only will one time if their offense isn't playing any better. But that could also be a big factor, I think, with Brandon Banks back there, who's probably one of the best in the nation.
Yeah, and that's another thing that just has gone wrong with this team from the beginning of the year on, really. They just have not covered kickoffs very well, and they could get exposed big time in this one. I mean, they might be better off just kicking it out of bounds and taking the penalty because Banks is the best in the country at returning these. And that helps out an offense that doesn't have much of a passing attack that's not really dynamic when they get great field position like that. So Missouri's got to be on its toes. They need to clean things up in a hurry because it's not going to get any easier from here on out.
On that joyful note, we will break for this week. Tune in again next Wednesday, and we will talk about that Kansas State game and then look forward to their final home game of the year against Iowa State.